our esteemed congressional representative in the Florida Panhandle, Matt Gaetz, has decided that he is going to force the vote in a very effective manner. And who's he forcing the vote with? Apparently he's forcing it with Ro Khanna to bring forth a line item of issues that are going to be needed to be in place in order to get the next Speaker of the House. So we're going to play for you a clip of exactly what Ro Khanna is proposing is of absolute necessity that we get. And for some reason, Matt Gaetz, yes, Matt Gaetz thinks that these are all great ideas and that we should form an alliance, if you will, to get it done. Oh boy, here we go.
The American people are frustrated and exhausted with the corruption and role of big money in the halls of Congress. That is why I'm introducing a 5-point plan. First, ban all PAC and lobbyist money to congressional campaigns. I don't take a dime of it. Second, ban completely stock trading and members of Congress from ever becoming lobbyists. Activists like Unusual Whales, Quiver Quantitative, and the leaders at Crew have been mobilizing for this. Third, term limits for members of Congress. Fourth, term limits for Supreme Court justices. And fifth, an ethics code for Supreme Court justices. This is common sense. The people demand it. It's time we give them back their government and we reform in Washington. We should have bipartisan support for this 5-point plan. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
And we agree. Thoughts, Keaton?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they'll probably be able to get that. Those seem like things, and I just saw that literally for the first time, so I didn't know that that had even happened. Those seem like things that they can probably get Jim Jordan to agree to. Now, it's funny because one of the things that was not discussed in that particular piece was the Ukraine funding, which was a big part of why this whole thing happened in the first place. It's interesting to think what would have happened had McCarthy included the funding in the bill that he used to sort of circumvent the Freedom Caucus. Would the Democrats have bailed him out in that case? Had they done that, then they wouldn't have to agree to any of these terms. But yeah, I mean, my suspicion is that they will probably get Jordan through, with or without the Democrats. And so, you know, it's interesting that, you know, Gaetz and Ro Khanna would try to work across the aisle when I think the Republicans could probably unify behind someone to the point where that wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't sure that they were necessarily really coordinating as much as it just seemed like to me that Matt Gaetz likes that legislation, likes that proposal, and wants to support it. I don't know. I didn't see them really working together.
Well, let me pull this up real quick so everybody knows exactly.
Not that it matters. It doesn't really matter.
Well, but here are the specific issues that are being addressed right now. And I think that this is very important for people to understand. You know, what we're looking at here is a list of different items that are being talked about. You know, Matt Gaetz says, you know, let's negotiate. My GOP colleagues want to raise the threshold on the motion to vacate. So the issues in question here that he is agreeable to that thinks should be included are ban on congressional stock trading. I mean, the idea that that's even a thing is unbelievable. 12-year term limit for Congress. I don't know if he's considering that a split between the House and the Senate. My guess is that it's 12-year term limits between both houses. Ban on political donations from lobbyists and PACs. I mean, look,
that's beautiful, but like I look at that like it's a dream universe. There's no way that's getting through anywhere. There's no way this Congress is voting for term limits.
I agree that that's true, but just the prospect of even having a vote on it would be unbelievable.
Well, then everybody's really going to have to be accountable. It'll be nice to see it.
Do you see that as even a possibility that there could be a forced vote, that there would have to be a roll call on these specific agenda pieces to see where everybody stands on it? I mean, I'd love to see my congresswoman have to take that vote.
You're talking about as a condition for becoming speaker, forced votes on those issues? Is that what you're talking 100%. About? I apologize.
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm seeing any of this. But
they're saying that that's what they want. And and I mean, if they force that to be voted on, what's that going to look like?
I mean, they probably lose. I mean, most of the most of those things probably lose. Yeah. So in that sense, I don't know how consequential that would be, but they could potentially get floor votes on them. But again, the question is, if we're talking about this as a precondition for voting in the next speaker, which is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah,
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
So I mean, Gaetz is saying let's negotiate. I'm sure what he would rather do is just unify the Republican caucus behind someone like Jim Jordan, which doesn't seem like too tough a sell. I mean, I can't imagine him losing.
So basically, it's all just theater, and he knows that no one's going to really have to vote on that.
I mean, I would think the Republicans could probably get behind someone. It's in their interest to do it that way. I mean, why would they go out of their way to do this if they didn't have to? I mean, I think, the interesting thing about this whole saga here is, we heard AOC fret during the attempted force the vote campaign on the Democratic side 2 years ago that there was no step 2 in mind. Well, what happens? So you block Nancy Pelosi. What happens next, right? They're at the point now, the GOP caucus is at that point where it's time for step 2 and they don't have a step 2. But the thing is, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like the idea of uncertainty in these outcomes is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I would argue in the case of the Democrats coming in 2021, it wasn't a bad thing at all. Like you need to force some uncertainty. You need to make something happen in order to jar something loose. And that seems to be what this process is here. I mean, it all depends, in my view, on how confident is Matt Gaetz, how confident is the Freedom Caucus that they can get to 218 without any Democratic help. That's the simplest way to go.
Right.
Well, it also is interesting that it appears, I'm sure that they wanted to get Kevin McCarthy out for a while. That's not a new thing, but
he barely could get in the first place.
Right. If there was any type of a backroom deal that was made to continue massive funding to Ukraine, and that's the reason why they're taking them out. I mean, you take anything at this point, as far as I'm concerned. The war machine is just so out of control, and if there really is this anti-war fervor of libertarianism on the right that wants to break bread with any real anti-war left movement in this country, you got to take what you can get, because there's really not a lot out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, look, there's no doubt about it. That's why what McCarthy did struck me as so stupid, because he really cut his coalition off at both ends, because he circumvented the Freedom Caucus, so you knew they were not going to forgive him for that. But it almost seemed like he stripped the bill of the Ukraine funding to try and save some sort of face with the Freedom Caucus, which was impossible. And by doing that, he betrayed the Democrats, making it, a near certainty that they would hang him out to dry. Came the vote, right? Like he didn't give the Democrats enough to the point where they would feel that there was something in it for them to save his ass when the vote came to oust him. And, there was an interesting choice on the Democratic side, because there's another spending bill that's due now in 40 days, 39 days. Yep. So, it's not like they kicked the can down the road all that far. Like this is going to come up again fairly soon. And so questionable strategy on both sides, but I don't see how McCarthy thought he was going to come out of that with the gavel in hand. It was just impossible, because he burned both the Freedom Caucus and the Democratic Caucus. So there was literally not the math left for him, because there weren't enough Republicans to put him over the top, which was the whole point of the whole force the vote thing 2 years ago on the Democratic side. The whole idea is narrow majorities favor the most, quote unquote, extreme elements of the majority party, because they can basically cuck the whole government, and that's what the Freedom Caucus did.
Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to have seen such sort of solidarity show of force back when there was the force to vote. And a lot of people's attitude about it was, well, what difference does it make if they vote on it? And to me, it's important if they vote on it, because it's just accountability. All right. Then everybody is on the record as we don't support this. And I think that that's something, especially when we're talking about term limits, that a lot of people haven't been on the record about in a long time. And most people in this country by far support term limits. Like that's not even close. And the only very small amount of like real leftist progressives that don't like term limits. But for the most part, people like term limits.
And if you look on social media, specifically Twitter, but we all know that there's a lot of, you could call them bots, you could call them sycophants, whatever. But the responses that are put out there as it pertains to why term limits are bad, apparently, is beat them at the ballot box. It's as if this notion of we have fair elections. Right. You don't have this incumbent advantage where it could be millions of dollars
right.
to their name.
Right.
It's
that only works in an actual functioning democracy.
But why do you think there's this level of obtuseness when it comes to, let's say, Manhattan liberals that are reflective of a lot of that liberal class that's around the country that really are not getting this sort of sea change that's happening right now? You don't think that they're completely naive to what's going on, that they've just completely buried their heads in the sand. I think they are aware, but they're just, in their mind, they are having a conservative reaction to what's going on and are determined to try to prevent the inevitable sea change that's happening right now.
Well, when you talk about the sea change, in what respect?
Just the fact that you have the prospect of RFK running as an independent, Dr. Cornel West running as an independent, the fact that the approval ratings for our two top candidates are
low.
The negatives are as low as the negatives for an incumbent are as low as George Bush's lowest numbers almost. We're really staring down the barrel of a generational change, if you will. It's pretty significant. And yet there does seem to be this contingent of people who either want to pretend it's not happening or want to do everything in their power to prevent it from happening.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are potentially world historic times. Tucker Carlson said in a speech that he gave, I forget what the forum was, we covered it on the show a few days ago, saying, the power structures are being challenged right now, and they have ways of responding that we don't know. He says, I'm not convinced. I don't think the race is going to be between Trump and Biden. There's 13 months left before November of next year. They can react in a million different ways. I mean, look at how the establishment is always 5 steps out in front of where we are. In 2016, the only reason Trump won is because they were so confident that the Democrats would win. Like they didn't just sit back during the 2016 campaign and say, "Oh yeah, this is nice, Hillary versus Trump, and maybe Trump will win. That'll be interesting." No, they went into election night that year 99%, literally New York Times, 99% sure that Hillary Clinton was going to win. They were laughing until 9:30 p.m. that evening when Trump took the lead in your lovely home state. And that was when they realized, oh, shit, we slept on this guy. But, they're, I think, more tuned into what's going on now. Look at what happened in California, where we thought that the reason why Nancy Pelosi was so insistent that Dianne Feinstein was good to go and fit to serve was because we thought that if Feinstein croaked, that Gavin Newsom would be forced to appoint Barbara Lee because he promised to appoint a black woman. And how could he snub the black woman in the race? Well, easy. He finds some Emily's List lobbyist to put in there for a year, and problem solved. She's a loyal servant to the Democratic Party. She'll drop out. She'll go back to her gig, raking in money hand over fist in a year. They'll get Adam Schiff in there. Like, they are 4 or 5 steps ahead of this thing, which is why, yes, there is a sea change on the people level, but it's going to take some strategy and some organization and some ruthlessness and some Machiavellianism in order to actually make an impact, because these people in power and close to power are 10 steps ahead of where they think where we think they are. Now, in terms of the liberal class, their response to this is the same. Thomas Frank's new book, The People Know, talks about this all the time. There is just this contempt and disgust amongst these people for democracy, really. I mean, they call it populism. They use the word populism as a slur, but really populism is their sort of pejorative version of democracy. They resent rule by the rubes, rule by the people. They feel they are more entitled, they are better positioned, they are better educated, they are more deserving of influence than the average person. That's part of why they cannot stomach Donald Trump, because he represents to them this need to engage with people who they just feel are beneath contempt. And like they don't want to have to consider the opinions of some middle American, you know, steel worker who's a greeter at Walmart now. It's like, who cares what this person has to say? Why should we have to care what this person has to say? We are so much better informed. We are so much more intelligent. We're so much more cultured. It's just they think of discourse with the people as something that is beneath them, as something they should not have to engage in, which is why their reaction to this is always scorn and contempt. And, you know, they'll kid themselves into saying it's because of, you know, Russian influence or something like that. But at the heart of it, it's just a contempt for the masses.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.